I knew something was wrong before I even turned off the engine. My suitcase was sitting in the middle of the driveway. Not by the door. Not stacked neatly. Just sitting there like it didn't belong to anyone. Like it had been dropped and left. Then I saw the rest of it. Boxes, clothes, my winter coat, the folder I keep all my financial records in. Everything I owned spread across the concrete like someone had shaken my life out and walked away. And then I saw my son. Ryan was standing by the garage, holding his phone up already recording. His wife Lindsay was a few steps behind him, talking into her own phone like she was hosting something. "There she is," Ryan said, not to me, to the camera. "This is exactly what I've been dealing with." I didn't say anything yet. I just sat there, one hand still on the steering wheel, trying to understand how fast a normal day could turn into whatever this was. I had just come back from work. Same schedule, same drive, same house. Nothing about the day had warned me. Lindsay turned her phone slightly, making sure I was in frame. "We're setting boundaries today," she said. "Sometimes you have to, even with family." Ryan didn't look at me. He kept looking at the screen. "She's been living off us for years," he said. "No contribution, no accountability." That landed somewhere between confusing and insulting, because I knew exactly what I had paid for in that house. I knew what had come out of my account and when. I could probably tell you the date and the memo line without checking, but none of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was that they had decided on a version of the story, and they were already telling it. Out loud, on camera, in front of anyone willing to watch. A car slowed down across the street. Someone didn't even pretend not to look, just sat there watching, like this was part of the neighborhood. I finally opened the door and stepped out. "Ryan," I said calm, "what is this?" He let out a short laugh, like I had just asked something obvious. "This is you moving out. That's not a conversation we had. It is now." Lindsay added, still speaking to her phone. "We've tried everything. At some point, you have to protect your own household." Protect? That word hung there for a second. From me. I looked back at the driveway. My things weren't just outside. Some of the boxes had been opened. A few items were missing. The lid of my storage bin was cracked. My coat had tire marks across the sleeve. This wasn't someone setting things down carefully. This was someone making a point. "You couldn't at least wait until I got home?" I asked. Ryan shrugged. "Didn't think it would make a difference. Of course it wouldn't. Not for them." I noticed then that he wasn't angry, not really. He looked certain. Like he had already decided how this would go, how it would look, and what people would think when they saw it. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about getting me out of the house. This was about making sure everyone believed I deserved it. I bent down, picked up the closest box, and checked inside. Papers. Still there. Good. I grabbed another one. Clothes, folded badly but still usable. I didn't rush. I didn't argue. I didn't give them anything they could turn into another clip. Behind me, Lindsay kept talking, explaining, framing, building something that sounded clean and reasonable if you didn't know the details. Ryan said one more thing louder this time, like he wanted it to carry. "She owes us over $16,000, he said. "Hasn't paid a thing in years." That one almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so far from the truth it actually took effort to say out loud. I closed the trunk of my car, halfway paused and looked at him. For a second, I thought about explaining. Just laying it all out right there. Dates, transfers, every payment I had made into that house since the day I sold my own place to help him buy it. But then I looked at the phone in his hand. And I realized something simple. This wasn't a conversation, it was a performance. So I didn't give him one. I finished loading what I could, shut the trunk, and walked back to the driver's side. Ryan was still watching me through his screen, waiting for something. A reaction, a mistake, something he could use. I looked at him finally, not at the phone. "All right," I said. That was it. No yelling, no speech, no explanation. Just enough to let him know I understood exactly what he was doing, and exactly how wrong he was about how this was going to end. I drove until the house was out of sight, then kept going longer than I needed to. Not fast, just far enough that turning around wouldn't feel like an option. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot off Morse Road. It was still open lights, buzzing overhead, a few cars scattered around, like everyone there had their own version of a bad night. I parked under one of the lights and turned off the engine. For a minute, I just sat there. No music, no phone, no thinking ahead, just quiet. Then I looked into the back seat. Everything I had managed to grab was piled there, boxes half open. Clothes shoved in one suitcase that wouldn't close all the way. My coat was still marked with tire streaks. My file folder had bent corners. That bothered me more than it should have. Not the coat, the folder. I reached back and pulled it forward, set it on the passenger seat, and opened it carefully. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, insurance emails, property tax receipts, all still there. I flipped through a few pages just to make sure nothing had shifted or gone missing. Dates lined up, amounts were clear, notes were still visible. Good. I closed it and set it down, like it was something breakable. That was the first moment I felt anything close to steady again. Not safe, not okay, just anchored. Around 1 a.m., I climbed into the back seat and tried to sleep. It didn't really work. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the driveway, the boxes, the way Ryan wouldn't look at me directly. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, my neck hurt, and the sky was starting to lighten. I sat up slowly, checked my phone. 12 notifications. I didn't open any of them yet. Instead, I went inside, used the restroom, bought a cheap coffee, and came back out. Sat in the driver's seat this time. Then I opened the first notification. It was Lindsay's video. Still up, still running views. The caption read, "Setting boundaries with a toxic parent isn't easy, but sometimes it's necessary." I watched it once, then again. She had edited nothing, didn't need to. The camera caught everything they wanted it to. My things on the driveway, Ryan explaining, Lindsay narrating, me standing there not saying much. From the outside, it looked clean, simple, like a situation that had been building for years and finally got handled. The comments were already filling in the rest. She probably deserved it. Parents like that never admit what they do. Good for you for standing your ground. A few people asked questions, not many. Most just accepted what they were given. That part didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how easy it would have been for me to believe it too, if I didn't know exactly what had happened. I scrolled down a little more. Ryan had shared it on his page. Same story, slightly different wording. After years of carrying someone who refuses to help themselves, you hit a limit. Years. I leaned back in the seat and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. That word stayed with me. Not because it was wrong, because it was being used in the wrong direction. I picked up my phone again and opened my banking app, not to prove anything to them, just to look. 3 years of transfers. Same account, same name, different amounts, different notes, property tax, HVAC repair, insurance catch-up, materials for a job Ryan said he needed help covering. I didn't need to calculate it. I already knew it wasn't zero. I closed the app and set the phone down. For a second, I considered calling him. Not to argue, just to ask one question. Where did that version of the story come from? My thumb hovered over his name. Then I looked back at the video, at the comments, at the way everything had already been framed, packaged, and sent out. And I understood something I should have realized the night before. They weren't waiting for my side. They had already decided it didn't matter. So I didn't call. Instead, I picked up the coffee, took a sip, and looked out across the parking lot. People coming and going, carts rolling, doors opening and closing. Normal. Like nothing had changed, which in a way made it easier to think clearly. If this wasn't going to be a conversation, then it had to be something else. Something that didn't depend on who talked louder. Something that didn't get decided in a comment section. I reached over, pulled the folder back onto my lap, and opened it again. I scrolled a little further, then stopped on a comment that had more replies than the rest. $16,000 and still acting like the victim. I read it twice. That number again, it wasn't random. It was specific enough to sound real, clean enough to be believable, and just vague enough that nobody would ask where it came from. I opened my notes app and typed it out 16,000. Then I opened my bank history again. Same account, same transfers, same names. I didn't need to add anything up yet. I just looked at the pattern. Every time Ryan had texted something like short this month, or can you cover this one thing, there it was. A transfer, sometimes small, sometimes not. I wasn't guessing. I was looking at it. I locked my phone and set it down again. Across the lot, a pickup truck pulled in, parked crooked, then straightened out like the driver changed his mind halfway through. A couple walked past my car without looking in. Normal again. It struck me how quiet everything felt compared to what was happening on my screen. Inside the phone, I was a problem someone had finally solved. Out here, I was just another person sitting in a car with a cup of bad coffee. I picked the phone back up and opened Ryan's page. He had posted a follow-up. Some people will twist things to avoid responsibility. We've done more than enough. More than enough. That phrase sat differently than the number. It sounded like something he believed, not something he made up for the camera. That mattered, because it meant this wasn't just about lying, it was about perspective. Somewhere along the way, what I had been doing, helping, covering, stepping in, had turned into something he no longer counted. Or maybe he never had. I went back to the video and watched one specific part again. The moment I stepped out of the car. The way I paused. The way I didn't say much. From the outside, it looked like I didn't have anything to say. Like I couldn't defend myself. That was the part they were relying on. Silence reads like guilt when people already have a story in their heads. I leaned forward, elbows on the steering wheel, and watched the clip one more time without sound. Just movement. Ryan talking, Lindsay nodding, my things on the ground, me picking them up. If you didn't know anything else, it looked reasonable. That was the problem. It didn't look extreme. It didn't look cruel. It looked justified. I sat back again and stared at the ceiling of the car. For a second, I felt something close to anger. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. The kind that doesn't rush you. The kind that makes you pay attention. Because the more I thought about it, the less this felt like something that needed to be argued. Arguments depend on people listening. And they weren't listening. They were presenting. I unlocked my phone again and opened my contacts. Ryan's name was still there, right where it had always been. I tapped it once. The call screen came up. I stared at it. All I had to do was press one button. Ask him where the number came from. Ask him why he said it like that. Ask him if he really believed I had done nothing. Simple questions, reasonable questions, the kind people expect in a normal situation. But this wasn't normal. Not with a camera already involved. Not with a version of events already circulating. I lowered my thumb and canceled the call, because if I called him, I would be stepping back into his version of the story. And I wasn't interested in being explained. I opened the folder again, this time more deliberately. Pulled out one statement, then another. Lined them up on my lap like I was checking something for work. Dates, amounts, notes, clear, consistent, quiet. I glanced back at the phone still sitting in the cup holder screen, dark now. They had a story. I had a record. And those weren't the same thing. I took one statement out of the folder and flattened it against the steering wheel. The paper was slightly creased from the night before, but everything on it was still clear. Dates, amounts, my name at the top. Ryan's account listed on the transfers. I didn't need to interpret it. I just needed to read it. I started with the most recent month and worked backward. $800 for property taxes. $2,000 for a furnace replacement he said couldn't wait. $600 for insurance when he told me there was a lapse. $300 here. $500 there. Smaller amounts that didn't feel like much at the time. Individually, they looked like help. Together, they looked like something else. I pulled out a second statement and lined it up next to the first. Then a third. The pattern didn't change. It just repeated. I reached over, grabbed my pen from the glove compartment, and circled a few entries. Not because I needed to, just habit. When something matters, you mark it. After a few minutes, I stopped circling and leaned back. 16,000. I didn't have the exact total yet, but I knew it was close. Close enough that it wasn't a coincidence. That number didn't come out of nowhere. It came from here, which meant one of two things. Either Ryan had forgotten what those payments were for, or he had decided they didn't count. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the folder. Then I picked up my phone and typed one name into my contacts. Angela Brooks. We hadn't talked in a few months, but that didn't matter. Some people you don't have to warm up with. She answered on the second ring. Helen, yeah. There was a pause just long enough for her to hear something in my voice. You okay? I need you to look at something. Another pause, shorter this time. All right, what is it? Numbers? I said, and I don't think I'm reading them wrong, but I want someone else to say it out loud. She didn't ask for details right away. Where are you parking lot off Morse? Give me 40 minutes. She hung up before I could say anything else. That was Angela. Direct. No extra conversation. I set the phone down and looked out through the windshield. Same lot, same people. Different morning now. More cars coming in, more movement, more noise. I checked the time. Not even 9 a.m. It felt like I'd been awake for 2 days. I opened the folder again and pulled out a smaller stack emails this time. Most of them were from Ryan. Subject lines like, quick thing, or need help with this one. I opened one at random. Hey, can you cover this bank's being weird again? I'll sort it next week. No follow-up after that. Just the transfer. I opened another. Insurance might lapse if I don't get this in today. Again, no follow-up. Just the transfer. I didn't feel angry reading them, just clear. Because nothing in those messages sounded like a loan. They sounded like urgency, like temporary problems that needed immediate solutions. Problems I had solved. A car pulled up next to mine, and a man stepped out, talking on his phone, already frustrated about something that had nothing to do with me. I watched him for a second, then looked back down at the papers. Angela's car pulled in about half an hour later. She parked 2 spaces over, got out, and walked straight to my passenger side without hesitation. I unlocked the door. She slid in, set her bag down, and looked at me. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't. She nodded once, then pointed at the folder. Show me. I handed it over. She didn't rush. Just opened it, started flipping through one page at a time. No commentary, no reaction, just reading. A few minutes passed. Then she stopped on one page, tapped it lightly with her finger, and glanced up at me. You said he told people you owe him 16? Yeah. She looked back down at the page. Because from what I'm seeing, she paused. Not dramatic, just precise. This looks like the opposite. I didn't say anything. She kept going, pulling out another page, then another, lining them up across her lap the same way I had. This isn't messy, she said. It's consistent. That word landed. Consistent. Not emotional, not complicated, just consistent. She closed the folder halfway, thinking for a second. Okay, she said. This isn't something you argue about over the phone. I figured. She nodded again. I want my brother to see this. I knew who she meant before she said his name. Daniel. Yeah. Civil side. He deals with this kind of thing all the time. I exhaled slowly. This isn't a lawsuit. I didn't say it was, she replied. I said I want him to look at it. She closed the folder completely and handed it back to me. Because right now, she added, you're not dealing with a disagreement. She waited just long enough to make sure I was listening. You're dealing with a record. I showed up early and stood off to the side until I spotted them. The event was small. A local fundraiser at a renovated hall downtown. Nothing fancy, folding chairs, a donation table, people in business casual, pretending it wasn't a work night. Ryan was near the entrance talking to someone I didn't recognize. Lindsay stood a few feet away, smiling at a couple like she had all the time in the world. They looked normal, like nothing had happened, like the driveway was just something that belonged to a different version of the week. I didn't walk up right away. I watched for a minute. The way Ryan nodded when people spoke. The way Lindsay leaned in slightly when she laughed. The way neither of them seemed uncomfortable. That part mattered, because it meant they weren't expecting anything to change. Angela stepped up beside me. You ready? I'm not here to argue, I said. Good, she replied. Then don't. Daniel arrived a few minutes later. He didn't introduce himself to anyone, just gave me a short nod and stayed close enough to hear far enough not to interrupt. I took the folder out of my bag and held it in my hands for a second. Not tight, not nervous, just steady. Then I walked over. Ryan saw me first. There was a brief pause, half a second, before his expression reset. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I live here," I replied. Lindsay's smile shifted, not gone, just thinner. "We're in the middle of something," she said. "I won't take long." That got a few people's attention. Not many, just enough. Ryan crossed his arms. "If this is about the other night, it is," I said, calm. "But not the way you think." He glanced around, checking who might be listening. "Let's not do this here. We're already doing it here," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I just opened the folder. 16,000, I said. "That's what you told people." Ryan let out a short breath, like he'd had this conversation in his head already. "Because that's what it is." I nodded once. Then I pulled out the first page. "This is 800 for property taxes, last October." I set it on the table between us. No one spoke. I pulled out the second page. 2,000 for the furnace. January. Next to the first. 600 for insurance. March. Then another. And this one, 300. Materials for a job you said you were short on. I didn't rush, didn't stack them, just placed them side by side. One at a time. Ryan looked down at the papers, then back at me. "That doesn't change anything," he said. "You were living there. I wasn't living there for free." "That's not how it works," he replied, sharper now. "How does it work?" I asked. That landed differently, because now it wasn't about what I was saying. It was about what he could explain. Lindsay stepped in, still controlled. "This isn't the place for a breakdown of household expenses." "I'm not breaking anything down," I said. "I'm just reading what's already there." One of the people nearby shifted slightly, trying not to look like they were listening. Ryan's tone changed again. Less confident this time. "You're making this look like something it's not." I didn't react to that. I just pulled out one more page. Total transfers over the last 3 years. I said, tapping the number lightly. "It's not exact yet. But it's close." He didn't ask what the number was. He just stared at the papers. That told me everything I needed to know. Because if he was sure I was wrong, he would have said it. Instead, he said nothing. Lindsay picked up one of the pages, scanned it quickly, then set it back down. "This doesn't mean what you think it means," she said. "It means what it says," I replied. No emotion, no edge, just plain, the kind of plain that doesn't leave much room to move. A man standing a few feet away cleared his throat and looked somewhere else, like he had just realized he wasn't supposed to be part of this. Ryan ran a hand over the back of his neck. For the first time since I had walked up, he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the table, at the pages, at something he hadn't expected to see laid out like that. I closed the folder halfway. Not because I was done, because I didn't need to keep going. Not here, not like this. I looked at him again. "You can tell your version," I said. "That's your choice." I tapped the folder lightly. "This is mine." I walked out before anyone could turn it into a scene. Angela stayed half a step behind me, not saying anything until we reached the parking lot. "That was enough," she said. I wasn't trying to prove everything, I replied. "Just set it straight." "You did." Daniel caught up a moment later, hands in his coat pockets. "You didn't argue," he said. "That helped. I didn't need to." He gave a short nod. "Good. Then don't start now." I drove home my temporary place, not the house, and didn't check my phone right away. That was deliberate. Because I knew something had shifted, but I didn't want to rush it. By the time I finally looked, there were a few new notifications. Nothing dramatic. A couple messages. One missed call. A comment under the video. I opened that first. Wait, if she paid for stuff, why are they saying she didn't? Just one line. But it was the first time I'd seen a question instead of an assumption. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The next day I went back to work like normal. Same desk, same files, same routine. No one there knew what had happened, or if they did, they didn't say anything. I appreciated that. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then it buzzed again. This time I picked it up. Hello, hi, this is Mark with Dayton Supply. I usually work with Ryan. I leaned back in my chair slightly. Okay? There was a pause. I just wanted to check something he said. We heard a few things about a situation at the house, all right? He hesitated again, choosing his words carefully. Are you still involved in payments related to that property? No. Another pause. Got it, he said. Just needed to clarify. Appreciate your time. He hung up before I could say anything else. I set the phone down slowly. That was new, not support, not blame, just verification. Later that afternoon, another message came through. This time from someone I actually knew, a neighbor from a few streets over. Hey, saw part of that video, just wanted to say, it didn't sit right. I read it once, then locked the screen. Still didn't respond. Because responding would turn it into a conversation, and I wasn't interested in explaining myself one person at a time. That night, I checked the video again. Views had gone up. Not dramatically, but enough. More comments now, still a lot of the same, but mixed in were a few like the first one. Short. Uncertain. Asking instead of assuming. Ryan had posted again. People are trying to twist this into something it's not. We've been more than fair. Same tone, same certainty. But now it read differently, because once people start asking questions, statements don't land the same way. I closed the app and set the phone aside. The next morning, I got an email. Subject line, quick clarification needed. It was from an insurance office tied to the property. Nothing aggressive, just a request. They needed confirmation on a few past payments. Dates, sources, standard review. I read through it once, then forwarded it to Daniel. He called me 10 minutes later. You see how this works, he asked. I think so. No one's accusing anyone yet, he said. They're just making sure the numbers line up. That's enough. Exactly. I looked out the window, watching a couple walk past with grocery bags talking about something ordinary. So I don't do anything I asked. You do exactly what you've been doing, he said. You don't chase it, you don't argue, you let it come to you. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Because right now, he added, this isn't about who sounds right. I picked up the folder from the edge of my desk and rested my hand on it. It's about who is. My phone started vibrating before I even finished pouring coffee. Not one call, not a message, just constant. I set the mug down and looked at the screen. 3 missed calls, then 4 more. Then a text came in before I could open anything. Call me. Urgent, Ryan. Another message followed almost immediately. Mom, I need you to pick up. I didn't touch it yet. The phone buzzed again. Different number this time. Then another. I let it ring until it stopped, then picked it up and checked the notifications. A voicemail from a bank, 2 emails from an insurance office, a missed call from a number labeled unknown, and 3 more messages from Ryan. I opened the first email. Subject request for verification, property account. I read through it once slowly. They weren't accusing anyone of anything. They were asking for confirmation, dates, payment sources, names attached to prior transactions. Clean questions, the kind that don't show up unless something has already been flagged. I set the phone down for a second, then picked it back up again when it started vibrating across the counter. This time I answered. Hello, hi, this is Karen with Mid-State Lending. The voice said, we're reviewing a file connected to a property on Ridgeview Drive. Your name came up in relation to several payments, and we just need to verify a few details. I leaned against the counter, steady. What do you need? She listed a few dates, a few amounts, all familiar. I can confirm those, I said. They were payments I made directly. Okay, she replied. And just to clarify, you're not listed as an owner on the current mortgage, correct? Correct. Understood. Thank you for your time. The call ended clean. No tension, no pressure. Just noted. Before I could set the phone down, it rang again. Ryan. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came in. Same name. This time I answered. What his voice was different. Not loud, not confident. Tight. What did you tell them, he asked. I answered a question. You don't understand what's happening, he said quickly. They're calling me now. The bank, insurance, everyone. They're asking about payments about your name. They should. That's not what I mean, he snapped. They're making it sound like something's wrong. I didn't respond right away, because for the first time he sounded unsure. Not about me, about the situation. They're just checking records, I said. That's not how this works, he replied. You can't just, I didn't do anything. That stopped him, not because it convinced him, because it was true, and there wasn't anything he could argue against. You need to call them back, he said after a second. Clarify things. Tell them it's just family stuff. I leaned back against the counter and looked out the window. Same street, same morning. Nothing looked different. I already clarified, I said. That's not what I mean, he insisted. You're making this worse. No, I replied calm. I'm not. He let out a breath sharper now. You're going to cost me this house. That line hung there, not emotional, not dramatic, just direct. I thought about it for a second. Then I answered the only part of that sentence that mattered. I didn't put your name on those payments, I said. You did. Silence. Not long. But enough. Because now we were talking about something real. Not a version, not a post. Something that had a record behind it. You don't need to do this, he said quieter now. I didn't respond to that. Because this wasn't something I had started. This was something that had finally reached a point where it couldn't stay contained. My phone buzzed again. Another call coming in. I pulled it away from my ear slightly and glanced at the screen. A local number. Different from the others. I ended the call with Ryan and answered. Hello, hi, a woman's voice said. My name is Marissa Lee. I'm with Channel 6 here in Columbus. I was told you might be willing to clarify a situation involving a video that's been circulating locally. I didn't speak right away. Not because I didn't understand the question, because I did. And I knew exactly why she was calling now. Not 3 weeks ago, now. I set the phone down on the counter and let the room go quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that comes from nothing happening. The kind that comes after everything has already shifted. Marissa's number was still on the screen. Ryan's messages sat underneath it. Emails, missed calls, all stacked together like they had been waiting for the same moment to show up. I didn't pick the phone back up right away, because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to respond to anything immediately. That was new. 3 weeks ago, I stood in a driveway watching my life get turned into a story I didn't recognize. Not because the facts weren't there, because the version of them had been rearranged, presented in a way that made it easy for people to understand and even easier to accept. And for a while, that version worked. Not because it was true, because it was simple. People don't question simple stories unless they have a reason to. And eventually, there was one. Not a big moment, not a dramatic reveal, just small things that didn't line up, numbers that didn't match, questions that didn't have clean answers. That's all it takes. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder again, flipping it open without thinking. Same pages, same dates, same entries. Nothing about them had changed, but the way they were being seen had. That's the part no one talks about. You don't have to make noise to be heard. You just have to be right long enough for it to matter. I closed the folder and set it down. Across the room, my coat hung over the back of a chair. The tire mark was still there, faint but visible if you looked for it. I left it. Not because I couldn't clean it, because I didn't need to pretend it hadn't happened. I walked to the window and looked outside. Same street, same houses, same people moving through their day like nothing had changed. And in a way they hadn't. That's the other part people get wrong. Things don't reset just because the truth comes out. You don't go back to what it was before. You just stop carrying what wasn't yours to begin with. My phone buzzed once on the counter. Not constant anymore. Just once. I didn't check it, because whatever it was, another question, another message, another attempt to explain something that didn't need explaining, it could wait. That was the difference. Before I would have answered right away, tried to fix it, tried to smooth it over, tried to make sure everyone felt okay with how things looked. Now I didn't feel that pressure. Not to respond, not to correct every version of the story, not to make it comfortable for anyone else. I picked up my keys from the counter and headed toward the door. There were still things to sort out. Logistics, paperwork, decisions I hadn't made yet, but none of them felt urgent in the way they used to, because the part that mattered had already settled. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. The air was cool, the kind that wakes you up without asking. And for the first time since that night on the driveway, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I didn't have to carry anymore. I didn't win anything. That's the part people expect to hear differently. There was no moment where everything flipped and suddenly felt fair. No clean ending where everyone admitted they were wrong and things went back to normal. That's not how real life works. And it's definitely not how family works when trust is broken. What changed wasn't them. It was me. For a long time, I thought being a good parent meant showing up no matter what, helping when asked, staying quiet when things felt off, letting things slide because it's family. I told myself that was patience, that was love. It wasn't. It was avoidance. Because the truth is, when you don't set boundaries, people don't always meet you halfway. Sometimes they just keep taking steps forward until there's nothing left of you standing in place. That night on the driveway didn't create the problem. It exposed it. And everything that happened after that wasn't about revenge in the way people usually think about it. No yelling, no payback, no trying to hurt someone back just because they hurt you. It was simpler than that. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. I stopped trying to fix a version of the story I didn't create. And I stopped confusing silence with weakness. If there's anything worth taking from this, it's this: pay attention to patterns, not just moments. Keep records even when you trust people. And don't wait for things to get extreme before you take yourself seriously. Because by the time something becomes public, it's usually been happening in private for a long time. A lot of family revenge stories sound dramatic from the outside, but when you're inside them, they don't feel dramatic. They feel quiet, confusing, and slow until suddenly they're not. And most revenge stories people talk about aren't really about getting even. They're about getting clear. Clear about what happened. Clear about what you'll accept. Clear about what you won't carry anymore. That's what this was for me. Not a victory, just clarity. And that turned out to be enough. If stories like this, real family drama, real-life decisions, and the kind of quiet revenge stories that don't always look like revenge mean something to you, then you're in the right place. Go ahead and subscribe. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't the loudest ones. They're the ones that make you stop and think about your own.